Hello and welcome back to the Orlando Adventures podcast. I'm your host Russ, and today's episode is the worst things about Universal Studios. So I did this episode quite a few months ago with regards to Disney, and it felt only right. It felt like it was time. It felt like it was probably only fair to do this for Universal Studios. So everyone loves a list. Everybody loves the opportunity to kind of write all these things down in a series. So I basically have compiled a short list of things that I believe are the worst things about Universal Studios. And it would have been very easy to have started and ended this with Fast and Furious, but I haven't. So what we're going to do, we're going to kick things off with the first section, which is unused areas. And as soon as I say unused areas, I'm sure a lot of you know what I mean immediately. These parks are fantastic. They're brilliant. The theming, the immersiveness of the areas that are in these two parks, and I'm talking about Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure, are fantastic. They really, really are. However, in both parks, there are a couple of sections that are unused. There are a couple of sections that could do with a bit of love. There's a couple of sections that essentially don't really have anything in them. And if I think of Universal Studios, I think of the Fear Factor stage. It's such a big area at the back of Universal Studios that it feels like a waste. If I'm absolutely honest, it feels like such a shame that there's not really anything going on in this section. And then if you go over to Islands of Adventure, you've got a very, very similar thing in Lost Continent. And Lost Continent is even bigger. Lost Continent actually still has stuff in the area, but it doesn't have any attractions or any rides at all. And I just find that really difficult because, especially with Lost Continent, you essentially have to walk through this area if you're going to head from Seuss Landing to kind of like either Velocicoaster, like where the Jurassic World kind of section is, or to Hogsmeade. So you have to go through Lost Continent, and it just feels like such a shame, and it feels like such a waste that you have to walk through this clearly heavily themed area that has nothing on offer, and that really it disappoints me. It disappoints me because I feel like, what was the point of closing the attractions in the area if the area is still there? And it's the same with Fear Factor. Like, don't get me wrong, Fear Factor is not really a thing that necessarily interests me, but at the same time, surely it would be better to have it than to just have nothing at all. And I don't get me wrong, I completely understand that, like, if something just doesn't pull any crowds, you've got to look at it and go, is it financially feasible, or, is it actually worthwhile staffing this attraction and this area to have very little footfall going through it anyway? I get that much. I understand it. But at the same time, it does just feel a little bit sad, and it makes these areas feel a bit dead. So I just feel like that's such a shame. And I feel like I appreciate that ultimately Universal Studios has been building Epic Universe. So I get that much. I get that their focus has been on Epic Universe. However, it feels like if you're going to essentially close an area, which is basically what they've done, then I would have a plan going forward to do something with it fairly imminently. Like, I know that we've had an announcement that Rip Ride Rocket is going to close. I would be immensely disappointed if they were to close Rip Ride Rocket and then just not do anything with it for years. Like, that just, to me, feels like such a waste of an attraction. And I'm not saying they're going to do that. I actually think that they'll probably crack straight on with it. Clearly, post Epic Universe, they're going to start like doing a lot more in probably Universal Studios especially. But there is stuff that needs doing in Islands of Adventure, and I feel like it's not, it's not coming at it from a negative angle. It's coming from these areas, and especially Lost Continent, was so immensely themed, and it really, really was, that I just want it to be something. I want it to have the kind of like appreciation it deserves, and ultimately, if it's not going to, then just do something else with it. I appreciate, and I know it's not as easy as that. These things take time, they cost money, etc. However, if we're going to move on from an area, let's actually move on from it. Let's not go 50% of the way there and then leave it. Let's just go whole hog and actually close the area off. I get that fear factor is kind of at the back. It's not really affecting anyone or anything, but the same kind of thing applies. I actually feel like Universal Studios as a park could really, really benefit from having an attraction in this area, and it doesn't. So yeah, that's where I stand on this one. And this is probably the one I feel the most passionate on. I feel that Universal Studios are very, very quick to feel like they need to retheme something. They're very, very quick to go, you know what, like, let's call time on it. But they, on the flip side of that, are not the quickest when it comes to going, actually, maybe we should act on this like now. It's like they've got a list of things they want to do, but then they kind of like throw in the idea of closing Fear Factor, for example, or just kind of not progressing with plans on something like Lost Continent. I mean, Lost Continent has needed love for a long, long time. So that is a very difficult scenario and situation. And I'm sure that there's an awful lot going on behind the scenes with it. But that's where I stand on that one. Anyway, I've probably gone on about that one a bit too long, but it is what it is. And the next kind of thing on my list, and as any of you will know, this is not a negative list. This is I feel like it could be better, but at the same time, they do this really well. So the next one on offer it's the food offerings. And I know that you're all expecting this to be on the list at some point. And when I say the food offerings, I have to compare it against Disney. We have to, because that is the other major theme park company in Orlando. And understandably, we are going to compare them to an extent. So, you know, with the food, I talk about, you know, I'm going to talk about things like the quick serve and the restaurants, like the actual kind of like more sit down dining opportunities. And the reason why I think that this is one of the worst things that Universal have on offer is because, in my opinion, I think that over at Volcano Bay, the food is some of the best offerings of things to do in that park. So I feel like they can do it, and they absolutely can, because I'll be honest, I think that the food offerings of Volcano Bay are top tier. I absolutely rate them. I think they're brilliant. And it just feels a bit disappointing that in studios and IOA, we don't necessarily have that same level across the board. And that's not to say there aren't good dining opportunities, because there really, really are. Some of the quick service stuff is fantastic. Some of the, they've got some really, really good offerings. But I think of things like Free Broomsticks and Leaky Cauldron. I think that theming-wise, they're brilliant. Like, they're absolutely fantastic. For me, the actual food options in those restaurants, it doesn't do as much for me. It really doesn't. And I know that there was this whole thing when they created the kind of like Harry Potter Wizarding World areas, that J.K. Rowling basically said, I'm up for there being restaurants, but I don't want them to serve things like Coca-Cola. I don't want them to serve like chips and burgers and stuff like that. I want it to be like quintessentially British. And I get that. And it's difficult as someone who is British to see offerings that, in my mind, one, don't feel that British, and two, are not what I would deem to be exciting food to eat in a theme park. But that's where I stand on it. That's where I stand on those two specifically. But if I were to talk about kind of some of the other places, I think of Mythos. We're going back to Lost Continent. Like, maybe I should do a Lost Continent episode. But going back to Mythos, like, this restaurant, I know it's been a bit of a running joke. It was certainly a running joke with myself, Chloe, and Stephen kind of going to the Orlando Awards, because Mythos actually won like theme park restaurant of the year with various different kind of like websites and stuff for years. So it clearly has been a really good theme park restaurant, but now I feel like it's not the one. And it's a shame, because obviously we look at Disney and we look and see what they have on offer, and they have so many amazingly themed restaurants and dining opportunities that I feel like Universal could and should do the same thing. I feel like they have the IPs, they have the things on offer to be able to do so. That's not to say they don't do good stuff. Like I said, a second ago, they because they really do. I think that the food court, to be honest with you, I think the food court over in Springfield is actually pretty good. I think that obviously everything on offer in there is like standard theme park food, but I actually think it's solid. It is solid for what it is, and but then like I said, I think of things like Leaky Cauldron. I also think of things like Richter Burger. I don't think is like right up there. Blondie's, like Captain America Diner. I don't think that all of those necessarily do enough or are different enough to kind of be worthwhile, if you know what I mean. I feel like they could just lean a bit heavier. And again, the reason why I say this is because Universal have shown that in terms of immersive experiences, I actually think they're better than anyone. I think they've shown that with places like Gringotts, with places like Diagon Alley especially, that they can make a heavily themed area and make it brilliant. So it just makes me a little bit sad that basically the food options at times basically haven't been maybe as good as what they could be. So that's where I stand on it. I think that in their kind of like their special in the different kind of experiences and events that they have through the year, things like Mardi Gras, they have loads of good looking foods and stalls going on then, and obviously Halloween Horror Nights, they got loads of options as well. So they do have these options throughout the year, and I think that they're trying to lean into that this year for sure. But I think that in terms of the actual restaurants that are on offer, I think they could do better. I genuinely could. And I genuinely do, because of that Volcano Bay situation. They've shown that actually the food that they can offer can be different, and it can be really good quality as well. So bring it over to studios, like do it. And if they do new areas, I think that they should lean heavily into that. And what I will say, and it's difficult because there's me saying that, but then at the same time, and you'll see this on the vlogs coming up, we went and got the Shrexel. I remember seeing the Shrexel come out months ago, and I thought, like, the thing looks like a joke, but it's you know what, I love a pretzel. I'm gonna go and get it. I'll be real with you, and I'm prepared to have a discussion about it, but I think that is the worst theme park pretzel I've had anywhere, and that shocks me because I quite like a pretzel from Universal Studios, but I thought it was not good. Like, genuinely, I didn't rate it at all, and it's such a shame because I love the idea. I love the idea of doing themed foods. I'm all for it. Absolutely am. All over it. But the quality of it just didn't feel good. It felt really poor. So this does feel a bit negative for me. But I'm being honest, and that's it, isn't it? You've just got to be honest about it. And there is that argument that they can do better because they've proven that they do better in literally one of their other parks. So there is that. The next thing on my list would be using the same ride systems. And I understand why they do it. Okay, so there's two rides. So you've got Spider-Man, which is obviously an absolute classic. The ride system that it uses is fabulous. The storyline's fantastic. And then they went, you know what? Let's go and do the same thing again with Transformers. I enjoy both rides. I think that both are great. I'm happy to ride both. I'd ride both for the same day. It wouldn't even bother me. And then they went, you know what? Let's go and do it again. But they obviously found a different ride system. And the ride system they found was the bus. So they went and did Kong. And to be honest with you, I didn't mind Kong. When Kong first came out, I was quite happy with it. I still don't mind it now. I wouldn't queue huge amounts of time for it. But I don't dislike it at all. In fact, I actually think it's a semi-decent ride. I love the theming of it. I think the ride and the story going on is fairly decent. I think the animatronic at the end is absolutely fantastic. And then they went, you know what, let's go and pull that back over to studios and do Fast and Furious. We all know where Fast and Furious stands. It is woeful. It is not good. But I feel like that's it. To me, it feels cheap. And I don't know whether or not that's the right word to use, but it feels a bit lazy that you basically invest in a ride system and then put it in the same park next door. And I get it. Like, to be honest with you, it works a bit with Disney. So, for example, if Disney do that and they put something in Hollywood Studios and then over in Epcot you've got the same ride system as well, I don't think it's too bad because the parks themselves are quite disattached from each other. The parks themselves, they are still quite a distance. Like to get from one park to another in Disney, I would argue is a lot more difficult than what Universal and IOA have made it. Because to get between studios and IOA is brilliantly simple. You can either walk from one to the other in probably 15 minutes, or you can jump on the Hogwarts Express, which is absolutely brilliant. So they've done this amazing thing in being able to get from one part to another, but by doing so, you can experience the two ride systems in the two parks very quickly in quite a short amount of time. So that's just kind of where I stand on that. I think that if you're going to bring a new attraction, and I'm all for it, obviously, just don't then go and use exactly the same ride system next door. I think that like put unique things in. Like the amazing thing about let's pick some examples. The amazing thing about like Men in Black is that Men in Black is Men in Black. There isn't another one. There isn't another version of the same thing. So it makes it unique. And the same with like The Mummy. The Mummy's a wonderful ride. It's brilliant. It's a great coaster. But you can't go on The Mummy anywhere else. And the same with Velocicoaster, Hagrid's, like Doctor Doom. Do you know what I mean? So there's that. But then there's something like Spider-Man, which is a brilliant ride. And then you go next door and you go on Transformers and go, oh, this feels very, very similar. So I just feel like that's a little bit lazy. And I'm all for a screen-based attraction. I know that some people are not as keen on the fact that Studios is very screen-based and it's quite screen-reliant. Well, Universal Studios is a film company. So what they specialise in is bringing films to life. So utilising a screen, it does make sense to me. It makes sense realistically, probably more than roller coasters do. But at the same time, they're obviously very good at doing roller coasters. So please carry on doing it. But so that's just kind of where I stand on it. I feel like going forward, if they're gonna do new attractions, don't use the same ride system. Do it once in one park, and that's fine. I would be let's be real, and I know that I say that, and we've got the Kookaram from Forbidden Journey, which is basically being used again over in the Dark Universe area of Epic Universe. So that feels a little bit like, okay, we're going to see the same thing again with something else, but it seems to me that they're going to use a lot more live props than the screen-based kind of reliance. So with that, I'm not as, I don't feel as bad on it, but also at the same time, it's going to be fairly difficult for you to go from Islands of Adventure over to Epic Universe in a short amount of time. I feel like they're far enough away from each other that actually you're probably not going to experience those two rides in the same day. And that's just where I stand on it. That's kind of what I feel on that one. It's an interesting one. I'd be interested to see what other people think as well, because I'm all for unique rides, and I understand why they potentially would use the same ride systems. I understand it from like an R&D point of view. I get it, but come on, Universal. Like, you don't have to just use the same thing in the parks next door to each other. And I know that Kong and Fast and Furious is a bit of a special case. I don't know quite what the situation was. I don't know whether or not they basically made a deal with the manufacturer of that ride and went, we'll order it, but we're gonna, like, it might have been that they had to order two versions of it or something like that, and they basically went, this will be the easiest way to be able to put it in two parks. I don't work behind the scenes, so I don't quite know how it went down, but to me it just feels like a little bit of a miss, and I feel like it would be great if going forwards everything they do is a bit more unique. The next point that I've got for the worst things in Universal Studios is a lack of shows. And I say a lack of shows, and the reason why I feel like it's one of the worst things that they do is because I think they're so good at it. And this is it. I feel like Universal are actually brilliant at shows. So you've all heard me talk about Bourne. I think it's brilliant. I really do, and I really do rate it. And I would tell anyone to go on that, go and see the Bourne Stuntacular, because if you basically go into it thinking that you're just going to go and see like an action kind of show, you'll be really pleasantly surprised, because it is totally different than anything anyone has experienced anywhere, in my opinion. So you've got that, you've got things like the horror makeup show, you've got Blues Brothers. I mean, like, they're all great for me straight off the bat. They're all great. The Marilyn kind of show doesn't really do a lot for me. I think that things like Celestina Warbeck, that's the show in Diagon Alley, and then you've got over in Hogsmeade, you've got like the Triwizard Rally, and is it the Hogwarts Choir, the one with the frogs? I think all of those are great, but quite a few of those are small. Quite a few of those are kind of like, 5-10 minute shows. Beat Builders is probably another one. So they do quite a lot of these, wheel someone out for 10 minutes, little show, see you later. I would love to see more permanent fixtures. I think something like Bourne or a makeup show, you've got a space over in Islands of Adventure, and this is another unused space. There is an amphitheatre over, I think it's between Marvel Superhero Island and Toon Lagoon. There's a massive amphitheatre there that they used to run shows on years ago. To me, that's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer to get like a proper show, especially in Islands of Adventure, because Islands of Adventure for me is missing one, because it used to have, and I don't know the name of it. Is it Voyage of Sinbad? Is it that? It could well be. But there has been shows in and around studios in IOA, and they've shown over the years that they can do them really, really well. So I want them to do it. I really want them to do it, because they're brilliant at it. And I'm so excited. One of the things I'm most excited for with Epic Universe is the How to Train Your Dragon show. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah. Anyway, what that show is, it just looks amazing. It really does. And for anyone who doesn't know about it, I would say don't look it up. Please don't look it up. Don't look up what it's going to be. Just go to Epic Universe this year and go and see it. And I think we're all going to be blown away, because I think that is Universal going, you know what? We can do this, and we can do it proper. I'm excited for it. I would just like to see more of it, especially in Islands of Adventure. I think Islands of Adventure for me is the one that really lacks shows. I know that they do kind of like the character meets with a lot of the Marvel characters and stuff, which is, up for debate in its own right. But at the same time, I think that whatever they have got in the parks is great, but I think they need more permanent fixtures from my point of view. The next thing and the final thing on this list is sometimes the rides. And this is big. This is big. And when I say the rides, what I mean is that recent additions at times for me have missed. And I'll list them. I think Kong's okay. So I'll start with that one. I actually think Kong is fine. I enjoy it. I don't hate it. I certainly would go on it if the queue was short enough. But then we go over to Universal Studios, and there's a couple. I'm not gonna lie. Race Through New York featuring Jimmy Fallon for me is a non-ride. I have done it. I have so little interest in doing it. I actually think that the pre-shows and stuff were really good and really entertaining. I didn't think the ride itself personally was that good. It feels like the weirdest thing to have in that ride, but at the same time, I don't have an appreciation for it. I'm not American. I don't watch The Tonight Show, so I get it. So I understand that much, that basically I'm not the audience. So, please don't take my opinion on this that strongly. But I just think that for me is a miss. I feel like something based on a film or a TV show opposed to a chat show would hit a lot better for me personally. The next one obviously is Fast and Furious. Like Fast and Furious is and will probably go down as the biggest miss of any ride ever, surely, because for 2 attractions to have closed for Fast and Furious is wild. It really is sad, and I know I talk about Fast and Furious a lot, and it is a real shame. But it is what it is, and I think that realistically, this ride will probably be closed in the next 3 to 4 years. I would be really shocked if it wasn't. And I hope that Fast and Furious gets a second chance. I really do, because I actually think the franchise deserves better than the ride it's in. So a lot of you might disagree, but I'm a Fast and Furious fan, so I will back it that much, but I will not back the ride. I don't think it deserves any more than it's probably been given. And the final one for me is actually Minions Villain Con. I don't dislike it. I don't dislike it at all. In fact, I quite enjoy like a shooter ride. But for me, it feels really weird. The guns are massive for a start. Like, obviously it doesn't bother me. Like, I'm okay with it. But if you're a bit smaller, if you're a child as well, like, that gun is big. Like, it is. And I have no issue with Minions. I have no issue with Despicable Me. I'm like, go for it. I'm not the target audience on that ride. There's no doubt about it. Like, so I certainly don't dislike it. But to me, it just feels a little bit lazy. It feels like, surely you could have done something else. And the thing that's saddest for me is that we lost Shrek 4D. Was it 4D? I think it was Shrek 4D. And it was another show. And I feel like just we've lost touch with a lot of these shows in Universal Studios, and it feels to me like something like Minions Villain Con was something that was quick, easy, cheap to put in there. And again, I get it, but at the same time, I would rather they waited another 9-12 months and put out something better than what is there now. Because that ride, realistically, that's gonna be there for the next 7 to 8 years. 7 to 8 years. In 7 to 8 years' time, is that ride going to be a must-ride for anyone? I'd argue probably not. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not the target audience on that ride. But I feel like just what Universal have done recently, I feel like they've missed a few too many times with some stuff. And then we go to the flip side. And now we go to the Russ being positive side. We've got stuff like Velocicoaster and Hagrid's, which they've done, which are brilliant. Like, they have managed to do both sides of the coin somehow. They managed to roll out something like Fast and Furious, which is woeful, and then they rolled out something like Hagrid's, which is an absolute masterpiece. So it just baffles me a little bit. It's like they've got 2 creative kind of teams going on. They've got a creative team who are like, let's just go all out on the stuff we know we're really good at. And then you've got the other side who go, well, actually, we just want to do stuff on a budget. So let's do something like Jimmy Fallon. Let's do something like Minions Villain Con. Like, let's go and do Fast and Furious ride system, the same as what we've used with Kong. Like, that to me feels very money driven opposed to consumer driven. But that's where I'm at. That is where I stand on it. And for all of the flaws, and there are some flaws, and there's flaws in Disney, there's flaws in Universal. There are so many positives. There really, really are. Like, and just to reel a couple, like value for money with Universal and Islands of Adventure, in comparison to Disney, I think in my opinion, I think the value for money is very good. I think you get an awful lot of bang for your buck. They've got some of, if not the best rides in Orlando. Their theming, the immersiveness, the events they put on. I mean, we're talking things like Halloween Horror Nights and stuff. Like, they clearly put out some spectacular stuff. Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure are wonderful parks. And it saddens me a little bit that they could be top tier. They really, really could. And I feel like they could be in a position where they could basically take that gauntlet. They could take the brass ring or whatever and basically run with it. They could be the top. They could be the biggest parks in Orlando in terms of what they have on offer. And I don't think they'll ever be bigger than Disney because of the size of the company. I don't think there's any argument on that. But I think that what they could offer in their parks could get Disney thinking. I really, really do. And I think Epic Universe is the start of that. I think that everything on offer at Epic Universe, obviously from what we've seen so far, looks unreal. And I really do mean that. And I'm not just saying it because I'm biased. I'm not biased to Universal. I'm not biased to Disney. I love them both, and I will always try to do both on every trip I do. Whether or not I manage to do that is a different story. But I think that they both have their own place. I think that we are the winners. We are the winners whenever we get to kind of go to these two amazing like kind of resorts. So I just want Universal to do. I want them to do more, and I appreciate it. It all comes down to money, doesn't it? That's always the main thing. It comes down to, how much is it going to be funded by Universal to do some of these kind of plans and bring new IPs. And I appreciate that there's going to be a lot of changes coming, and I've got a really fun episode lined up with a couple of previous guests to be able to discuss this kind of stuff. So I look forward to that one, and then we'll obviously see that one in due course. But I hope you've all enjoyed this one. I really do. And I never want to kind of delve into negativity. That's not my way. And anyone who knows me will know that that's not the way I do it. But every single one of these points stems from the fact that Universal already do it better somewhere else in one of their parks. So I just want to see consistency. I just want to see Universal go, we know what we're good at, so let's just do it. Instead of like maybe feeling lazy or maybe feeling cheap or maybe just like dragging something out a few too many years for being in a park when it should have got updated sooner, or closing something a bit too early. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of points to kind of raise and a lot to discuss. So, if there's anything on your list, if you can think of anything in your opinion that you think are the worst things about Universal, like, hit me up, let me know, because I love these conversations. I think they're good fun, and that's what going to these parks is about, isn't it? If we all had the same opinions on stuff, it wouldn't be super exciting, would it? But the fact that we all have different opinions, there's people out there, and I haven't met them yet, who think that Fast and Furious is fantastic. But you know what I mean? There are people out there who will go, I think Velocicoaster is overrated, and I'm prepared to hear you out. I absolutely am. If anyone tries telling me that Doctor Doom's overrated, then we might have an issue. But I totally get it. We're good. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as I've enjoyed recording it. I love recording the podcast, as you all know, and I enjoy chatting with you all. I think you're all absolute legends. So once again, thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you all in the next one.